Now, if you watch my channel at all, you've probably noticed I'm a big fan of, space, and flying ships around in space. Well, recently, I got a hold of Everspace! Oh, it's a roguelike starfighter combat game. It was kickstarted in 2015, released in 2017 with an expansion since then, Encounters, which I've got because it's quite good, and it's from the original developers of the mobile game series Galaxy on Fire. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit apprehensive about the quality, just from hearing that developers used to work on mobile games, and knowing that the most recent Galaxy on Fire game is awash in microtransactions and loot boxes. But this is the original dev team, who made 2 quality games with no microtransactions to be seen, and thankfully they've brought the same attitude to Everspace. Nothing extra to be paid for, aside from the substantial expansion pack called Encounters, which is absolutely well worth the price. Now, overall, the structure of Everspace is quite similar to one of my favourites, FTL, in that you have a series of areas that you need to jump to, with combat or story encounters along the way, each area being randomly generated as you progress to the end of each sector, with the sectors getting harder as you go along until you reach the final stage. Which I'm not going to talk about here because there's actually a story to be had. Yes, that's right, this game has a pretty cool story, and some fun side quests throughout. The conceit is that you are a clone. That's the only spoiler that I want to give you here, and you find it out so quickly that it's like spoiling Harry Potter by saying that he's a wizard. You don't remember anything about your original life initially, but as you progress through the game, you get flashes of memory. So you jump into a starfighter and the onboard AI tells you that you need to make it to the pre-programmed coordinates. You live, you shoot, you die, you spend the money you've been collecting on upgrades for later runs, slowly accumulating upgraded versions of the ships that you have and blueprints so that out in the field you can build your own awesome weapons. The combat's fun, it's fast paced, the ships are few but varied, with multiple loadouts once you progress far enough with each ship. I'm personally a big fan of the Sentinel from the expansion, and I've been more or less using it exclusively. And the game is gorgeous and well optimized. It even runs well on my computer, which is it's got a 13-year-old CPU and runs PUBG at 20 frames a second and is mostly held together by duct tape and ritual sacrifice. So this is a great game and you should absolutely get it. But I love my HOTAS joystick, and I'll use any excuse to use it because it's just great. That's one of the main reasons I got Elite Dangerous, is I wanted another reason to use this aside from just playing X-Wing and TIE Fighter all the time, even though I do still play TIE Fighter all the time because it's just the best game. Now, I spent hours trying to get this to run with Everspace because Everspace says that it has full controller support, and I mean, it sort of does. You can get your other controllers to work with it, but it won't even recognize that you have a joystick input for it. But for reasons that I'll explain later, I don't feel... Having played it now, I don't feel that the HOTAS joystick would work particularly well with it. And that's not so much criticism of the game as it is just... I mean, I guess it sort of is. So after hours of trying to get that to work and eventually just giving up, I jumped into the game. This is, of course, after hours of just trying to get the game to run, because apparently there's a very common bug which I came across, which again, not very good computer, might entirely be because of that. There's a fairly common bug that people have been running into where the game just won't run from Steam and you need to dig into your program files in order to just run the executable file from there, but eventually it just stopped doing that and just started running from Steam, and I've got no idea why. Once I gave up trying to get my joystick to work and, contemplated briefly using a controller, and before just saying, you know what, I've got a mouse and keyboard, why not just try that? I found the most intuitive flight controls that I've found in any sort of space sim for a long time. Unlike X-Wing and TIE Fighter's planes in space method of either move forward or death, and Elite Dangerous's 10-week pilot course, Everspace allows complete and simple freedom. Your WASD keys will fly you forward, backwards, side to side as though you're playing a first-person shooter, with your mouse doing the aiming and turning for you. Then, when they went for some added flair with your space and control keys shifting your ship up and down, while Q and E have you roll in opposite directions, and Shift allows you to boost, and by golly, if I wasn't having the greatest time ever with the most complete freedom I've ever had in this kind of game. But, you know, then I decided, you know what, in the interest of completeness, I'm gonna plug in my Xbox controller and see how that goes. And the moment that I plugged it in, all of that intuitiveness just went completely out the window. So it goes from this incredibly intuitive mouse and keyboard control scheme over here, and then you bring out your Xbox controller and you go, oh, I'm going to give it a go, because it is available on PS4 and Xbox and now on the Switch, so you might be looking at getting this on the Switch. That's cool. So I bring out the controller, because, you know, interest in completeness and all that. This right joystick will let you look around, that's fair. I move this joystick to the left, and I shimmy to the left, you know, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. I move to the right, and I shimmy to the right, oh, that's cool. And I pushed it up, and then instead of flying forward, I just sort of flew up. And I couldn't find a way to, you know, remap all the controls. It's not like Elite Dangerous, where you can just sit there for hours remapping every single function to whatever the hell you want it to be. So, to go forward, you pull this left trigger, and it does kind of make sense. I do kind of understand the reasoning for it, and, you know, once you get your head into that mindset, it's kind of okay. But then I suddenly realized that it felt like I was playing with blinders on. There's a problem I've always had with first-person views and driving or piloting in games, which is that you lose your peripheral vision. If you're driving a car in Forza Horizon, you can't check over your shoulder real quick to see if someone's overtaking you, or at least not intuitively. You can't just sort of glance over your shoulder as though you're driving a real car. And this is why VR comes in real handy. You know, you can be driving a car or flying a spaceship and someone flies past you or seems to be coming up beside you, and you just turn your head and you see, yeah, they're there. And you don't lose sense of where you are. I'm not going to say whether or not I recommend VR for this game, even though it is VR supported, because, as you may have guessed, my computer can't handle VR, and also I sort of feel like VR with this game might make you a little bit sick. Part of the problem of playing these games in first person in the middle of a dogfight or something is limited view space. You've got this intricately detailed cockpit interior that does nothing but obscure your vision. See Star Wars Battlefront, for example, where you fly an X-Wing, a TIE fighter flies past you, you've got no idea where it's gone. The other part of this is that the player is essentially in a neck brace looking straight forward, giving you extremely limited spatial awareness. Again, this is solved mostly by VR. But you know what game doesn't have that problem? And came out in 1994? Yeah, that's right, guys, I'm talking about TIE Fighter again. Look, I'm gonna have to compare it to TIE Fighter. I didn't want to jump in and just start being like, cool, this game's great, but have you considered TIE Fighter? But it is a space combat sim, and TIE Fighter is a space combat sim, and I got to talk about TIE Fighter. Now, in TIE Fighter, your view was locked straight forwards. You could check a view screen to see what was out at different angles of your ship, but these controls were fiddly and unintuitive, so generally, you look dead forward, and that is fine. Because despite the fact that you are looking dead forward and have no sense of peripheral vision, and yet, despite all this, I had very few problems identifying where enemies were in relation to me, where they were facing in relation to me, and how far away they were. This is because two main ingredients to the excellent meal that is TIE Fighter, scopes, and a targeting computer. Now, in all of the X-Wing and TIE Fighter games, the interior cockpit is covered in screens that actually show useful information. Your HUD was built into the ship. Hanging from the top left and right sides of your screen were your scopes. These show you what's in front of you and what's behind you. Is it a red dot? It's Imperial. A green dot? A Rebel. A yellow dot? It's a missile. Blue dots are just neutral parties, or occasionally, you know, some freelancers out to, you know, kill you. But moving on from all that, the very center of each scope corresponded to directly in front and directly behind you, meaning that if the dot was in the center of your forward scope, it would also be in the center of your crosshair through your viewport. The targeting computer takes up prime position in your cockpit in X-Wing and TIE Fighter. This displays an image of the ship that you have locked, its relative hull and shield strength, as well as its orientation relative to you. At the same time, if you have the target selected, its corresponding dot on your scopes will be highlighted, as well as the image of the ship through your main viewport. What this means is, despite the fact you're essentially stuck looking straight forwards, unable to turn your head, you are given an extremely good understanding of your surroundings. In Everspace though, I need to commend them because they've put some effort into putting some main HUD elements into the cockpit interior, just like X-Wing and TIE Fighter. It's a little thing which I love. It's got, the weapons, your shields, your hull, damage systems, etc. But they apparently chickened out at the idea that people would be able to use and understand this, as they put the exact same HUD elements just floating across the top of the screen. Now the cockpits, well, 3/4 of them are wide open, allowing for a relatively unobstructed view of your surroundings, and as you move your mouse to target enemies, the camera turns as well, allowing you to see more of the cockpit and through side, top or bottom windows, which alleviates the feeling that you're strapped into your seat, unable to turn your head. But when you play with a controller, that's removed. So your crosshair is fixed in place, bringing you back to a strapped-in position with no peripheral vision. As for targeting, there is only one targeting button, which will select either the nearest craft or what you have in the middle of your crosshair. And if you place your crosshair over something, you'll find out what it is, as well as its distance from you, its shield and hull strength. And when a ship is off your screen, you just have a red indicator at the side of your screen, indicating roughly the fastest way to turn to bring the ship into your screen and into your crosshairs. So what this means is that you have immediately a much more limited sense of spatial awareness than you did in the 1994, I can't stress that enough, the 1994 game of TIE Fighter. The only real remedy for this is to play the game in third person, which gives you much more peripheral vision by proxy, and this game is definitely best enjoyed in third person, because it alleviates all of my little criticisms, aside from the fact that, again, if a ship flies off screen, you don't know where it is, aside from the little tiny indicator. But yeah, play it in third person. You know what? Play it in third person, and the controller works a lot better as well, because, the crosshair's fixed, but what they actually do for that is they give you a lot more targeting assist. Whereas if you're playing it just with mouse and keyboard, you actually need to be quite a lot more accurate. I guess the controller helps. So where do we sit then? Well, Everspace is a whole load of fun. It's pretty, it's challenging. If you're not playing with a mouse and keyboard, then play it in third person and it'll be brilliant. It's pretty grindy, and it's not as good as TIE Fighter, but, what game is? Overall, I definitely recommend Everspace, as long as you get the Encounters expansion. I never played it without the expansion, and honestly, I don't think I ever will. Part of what I'm doing here is I'm going to review games only once they're out entirely, because more and more often I've been seeing games come out, and then the moment, after they've been released, they get reviewed, and then the developers go, okay, cool, now we'll change it, so we have good reviews, and now we'll throw a whole load of microtransactions and bullshit into it. So I'm only going to review what I deem to be complete games. Games which have pretty much, I think, reached the, sort of end result. Anyway, that's Everspace. Give it a look. I'm a fan. And, yeah. Bye.